Hey there, and welcome back to the Vacation Rental Success Podcast. Mike here from the Vacation Rental Formula Business School, and I've got some huge news today that you won't want to miss. After months of work with our Thrive training system clients and in consultation with our advisory board, the Thrive Essentials course is finally live. That's right, Thrive Essentials, the ultimate onboarding tool for vacation rental teams, is officially available starting today. And if you're a property manager who struggles with the time it takes to train new hires, this course is the perfect tool for you. Thrive Essentials will teach your new team members everything from the inner workings of a property management company to excelling in hospitality and contributing to a vibrant work environment if they work virtually or in person. The best part, for the entire month of October, we're offering the course at a special launch price. But there's a catch. Once October ends, the price goes up, so now is the time to act. Go to vacationrentalformula.com or visit the link in the description of this episode on your smart device and sign up today to lock in your special October pricing. This is what you've been looking for to help streamline your new hire onboarding so you can focus on the important parts of developing them for their specific roles. Go now and secure your registration. Now, let's talk a little bit more about Thrive and the steps to ensure a new team member can make an impactful contribution to the team from day one in this episode of the Vacation Rental Success Podcast. And here's your host, Heather Bayer.
This is the Vacation Rental Success Podcast, keeping you up to date with news, views, information, and resources on this rapidly changing short-term rental business. I'm your host, Heather Bayer, and with 25 years of experience in this industry, I'm making sure you know what's hot, what's not, what's new, and what will help make your business a success. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Vacation Rental Success Podcast. I'm joined today by my son and my business partner, Mike Bayer. You've just heard from him. We are going to be talking about how you can transform your new hires into top performers. And there's a story behind this. I'm going to talk about that story and how I learned how important it was to incorporate knowledge right up front when you take on board new hires. And we're going to be talking about that. We're going to be talking about 7 steps to enable you to do it. Mike, welcome. Super to have you back here on the show. You should do this more often.
I know we have so many wonderful people in our vacation rental, short-term rental industry that it's sometimes hard to slide me into the podcast guest seat, but it's always nice to be here. And we obviously have something to share and talk about because we have been working very hard on a passion project that came out of something that we started at the beginning of this year. And it's the whole process of onboarding new team members onto your property management company Rockstar team, and that's what we're going to go through is these key 7 steps that often can be left out purely because we have a bad habit of onboarding people in the busiest time of the year. And this is what we heard from a lot of our Thrive training system clients through this summer, is the challenge of giving people the foundational knowledge that they need to succeed while deferring that for the training that is specific to their role.
Yeah, as I just mentioned in that introduction, there's history behind all this. And the history is that I was a property manager for 20 years, and there were a lot of things that I didn't do as well as I could have done over that time. And I think one of the major ones, when I look back, was that we never had a really good process for bringing new people onto the team. And I guess we must have done something right because our team members are still there with the new owners of the company, even after I sold it. But one of them, our office manager, has been there, I think, 17 years now. And the story I'm going to tell you is about another team member who I think has just passed 12 years with the company. And she is doing amazingly well now in her role as a business development manager. She's doing owner acquisition. When we hired Caitlin, she had just graduated from, what was the course she was doing, Mike?
It was a diploma program in communications and social media marketing.
Right. And that, way back, we're talking 12 odd years ago, social media wasn't as big, massive as it is now, but it was really gaining some ground. When Caitlin started, She was thrown in the deep end with a lot of this new social media stuff, and she'd learned a lot about the theory. And we hired her as our marketing manager. So she's straight out of college. She gets the title of manager, and she's off and running. It wasn't until I sold the company 10 years after that, and
Hmm.
the new owners came in, and within 3 or 4 months, Caitlin was out of that role of marketing manager and into a new role or in owner acquisition. She became the business development manager, and she is doing fantastically at it. I was out having coffee the other day with my old business partner, and he said, she just loves it. She is out there bringing on new owners every single day. She does all the photography and the Matterport. She's in her element. And I said to him, she never was in that role as marketing manager. And I'm not going to say she wasn't great at it, but I don't think she ever really enjoyed it.
I think quite often you will find employees who have certifications and they have qualifications on their resume, and you may hire them based on that. But what we've learned over the last few months of conversations with Steve Trover and the team at Better Talent, as we've been looking to hire people for the Vacation Rental Formula Business School, is that certifications and that kind of knowledge actually takes second seat to the person's personality and whether or not they're the right person for the job that you're hiring. Because every job requires a slightly different personality to really thrive and excel. And that's what we've learned. And I think what we're doing is in this episode, we're talking about more specifically the foundational knowledge base to give people. So no matter what role they're going into, they can relate their role to how the property management company can succeed and roll forward with in all aspects of the business. But I think at the end of the day, you've always got to look at the person you're hiring. Are they the right person for the right seat? And it doesn't come down to their qualifications specifically.
No, exactly. The other thing I wanted to mention is that when Caitlin came on board, and in fact, when all of our team members came on board, I was always looking for some form of training to give to them because none of them had any experience. They had no knowledge of the industry or the business whatsoever. I remember Sandra joining us 17 years ago, and she said she came on board as a bookkeeper and then became our office manager. And it took her months before she really figured out how it actually all worked and that people actually rented their homes out. She just couldn't
Hmm.
really get to grips with that. And I searched high and low for courses or something that I could get them to sit down with them and say, okay, you just do this online training and that will give you all the background that you need to know about this industry. There was never anything then. There was never anything at the time we sold the business. There is training out there for virtual assistants to teach them how to do some customer service. There is training for sales, but there is nothing that can be delivered to a brand new team member that says, this is what vacation rentals are all about. This is the role of a property management company. Here's the software and technology you might encounter. These are the core values of this business that you'll encounter as well. These are the industry standards and best practices. Here's how to excel in hospitality. And most important of all, this is how you work in this type of team, in this type of environment. So this is what we want to talk about today, is those 7 things that every team member needs to know before they really get up and running in the business. And I think what's happened a lot in the industry this very past busy summer, and we heard from a number of people that, as you mentioned earlier, Mike, that they'd taken new hires on, and then within 3 or 4 weeks they're gone and they can't figure out why this is. We mentioned perhaps not having the right people in the right seats. But I did talk to a manager recently who said this person we got in just did not understand what the business was about. She struggled because she saw the business through the lens of Airbnb because it's all they know.
What we're going to talk about today is going to give that new team member within your property management company. These are the key points to give them before you start that specific role training. And this can just take, I think many people will think this can take many days. We're looking to cover this in a very short period of time, within a few hours with the right online delivery.
Okay.
So let's get cracking. And so what's the first, let's talk about the very first step, which I think is a really good one, which is the history and evolution of vacation rentals. And let's talk about, so why is that important?
Because of what I just said, that anybody that has come into the work market since 2014 would see the business only through the lens of Airbnb, because Airbnb has taken over the airwaves, and anyone who has been looking for a vacation rental will probably have used Airbnb, and that's probably all they know. We think it's really important that they understand that this industry didn't begin in 2014 with Airbnb. It started out a lot earlier. And particularly if a new team member is coming in to join a property management company that's been around a long time, they're joining a company that was in the business way before Airbnb. That history is going to be really important to any new team member there. And I believe it's crucial for new hires to understand about HomeAway and VRBO and how VRBO became Verbo, and how
Hmm.
booking.com came on the scene after being really popular in Europe and now popular in the US. So what we've put together is a shortish module, but it gives this timeline of the vacation rental business and looks at some industry trends and key concepts about that timeline.
Yeah, because there have been some huge challenges, that transition from magazines and catalogs to internet, and then the growth of the internet and the growth of the online travel agencies, and now the resurgence of larger franchised property management companies. There's such a big story here, and I think that just anybody coming into the business needs to have a little bit of understanding of where we were, where we are, and then what the industry trends are. Like, what are we trending towards? It doesn't matter what role you're in, whether you're a frontline cleaner or if you are the operations manager coming in, especially if you're coming in from another industry, from hotels or any other travel agency, cruise ships, and you want to stay in the hospitality or the travel industry. And this is essential foundational knowledge for somebody to understand so they can really get a grasp on where the company is in that story. Especially as we evolve, that it becomes even more complex. We're starting to introduce AI. We're getting to grips with dynamic pricing. These are all the different things, and these are entire roles for somebody within your organization.
Yeah, we're going to come back to that in a second when we talk about software and technology. Okay, let's move on to the second and arguably the most important one of these seven, and that is teaching people what the role of a property management company actually is. Because I think what happens is that a new team member comes in, maybe it's a reservationist, maybe it's a guest experience person, or even a business development manager, and they're told what to do in that role, but perhaps not given enough information about how all these pieces all hang together and make that whole, with the ultimate goal, of course, of achieving ultimate guest satisfaction.
It's the old adage of any team. You can look at sports, that any member of a sports team understands the role that the other teammates play on the team. Because without that understanding, you can't come together and anticipate what your teammate needs. So when we're talking about uh, property management companies, you have to ensure that every member of staff is aware of what the roles are when it comes to serving the company's stakeholders. So we have four key stakeholders, and that's the guest, the owner, the community, and the team. So if you're hiring a reservationist who comes in without any training about the roles of a property management company, the different stakeholders involved, they're going to arrive in their seat at their desk with their telephone and their headset. And what they're all going to think about is, I'm serving the guest. That is it. However, if they understand that they're placing that guest into a home that is owned by a third party owner who's trusting your company with their property, you are then going to be putting that guest into a property that has neighbors. So you have to think about the neighbors to that property. And then you have to think about how the members of your team in housekeeping, in guest services and maintenance, how they are then going to have to service that guest. So these things come into play, especially as for a reservationist, when you're trying to find that perfect property for a guest with 5 children and 2 dogs. That maybe the property that is in the middle of a quiet gated community might not be the best spot for them, but if that's the one they want, you can try and steer them to something that will suit them better to give them the better experience because you're thinking about all these other stakeholders involved. So I think that the key thing here is when you're hiring the right person for the right seat. You've already thought about that. You're already bringing in the correct person. But it's the hardest thing to do to make sure that they are well trained. Because if you don't do that, it can be the worst experience.
Yeah, and knowing what this property management company does is at the core of that training. So the
Hmm.
third one is vacation rental software and technology. I think once again, somebody arrives at a company, they're sat down in a seat and they're shown the PMS. This is our property management software. This is what it does. Here's the channel manager. This is the dynamic pricing. This,
Now, the question is yes, they're going to be showing their PMS, but how many days is it before that new employee is comfortable asking, what does PMS mean?
yeah, that's
That means a lot of different things to a lot of different people.
indeed, and it's one of the reasons that in our Thrive Essentials course, we have the most massive glossary of terms so that we cover all the jargon and the acronyms and the abbreviations. I think this industry is great at producing abbreviations for everything. Came up with something the other day and it was a TWA. Does it have a TWA? And I said, "What is that?" Go on, guess it. What do you think it is?
I was going to say in the fire service, it's time weighted average.
No. So a TWA is a three-word acronym.
Oh,
So
which
if it
makes
doesn't have a
total sense.
TWA, it's not worth being in the business. Anyhow, so yes, we sit them down, we show them all of this, and then they're expected to get on and work with it. If you start off by telling your new hires all the different types of software they may come across in a company they go and work with, they will come across a property management system or property management software, PMS. They will likely come across dynamic pricing, so we tell them what that is. They will likely come across something that's weirdly called a channel manager. It was years before I figured out what channel manager actually was when I go back to 2012, 2014, when it started to become words that were used in this industry. But now everybody's meant to know what it actually means. And then what about guest communication software, operations software? Some companies, of course, are going to have a PMS which covers everything, but others will have this huge vertical tech stack that somebody is meant to learn. But if they understand what these all are and what their purposes are at the outset, it's going to be much easier for them to take it all on board.
Yeah, and I think it's understanding how each piece of technology fits into the business operations because you will be in communication with other team members and they're going to be referring by name probably to different pieces of software or technology that the company uses in different divisions. Now, if a new hire is not familiar with those names or terminology, it can completely throw off their understanding of what somebody is asking them to do. It's not just making them aware of the software and technology that they're using in their particular role, but it's also understanding the software and technology that's available across the different divisions in the organization. They don't need to know how to use it, but they need to know what it is that they're using, what it's called, why they use it, and how that may actually help them in their position or role, whatever that may
Yeah,
be.
it's just understanding the purpose and the functions of all the things
Hmm.
that are in place. And you don't have to go into deep detail of what Breezeway does if you're not involved in using Breezeway in your job, but just knowing that perhaps Breezeway is in operation at this company is going to help out more holistically.
Yeah, and I think especially if you're hiring people who are coming into roles that requires them to use a lot of technology, it obviously helps if they have some experience in interconnectivity between platforms. But the other thing is too is you are going to be bringing in people with knowledge and experience from other organizations or the companies. If there's happens to be a problem or an inefficiency with that particular software, they may have a light bulb moment that so they can bring that to you that they've used something different somewhere else. This was a problem I had in another company, and that's what they were using. So you're also empowering your new team member to have the full grasp and understanding of the operational tech stack, and they may be able to suggest solutions to problems you may already be having.
Yeah, exactly. So the fourth one is core values. And there's been a bit of an interesting exchange on LinkedIn recently because I mentioned something about values. I was asking if there's anybody out there who incorporated their company values within what they did operationally. And it was interesting that I had very little response.
Yeah, I think it's very easy to, and especially now with AI, to say, oh, help create a vision statement and a mission statement and give me six core values for my company. That's great. But if you don't actually believe them as the leadership team, if it's not something that really resonates with you and that's what keeps you going each day, then they're pointless. And then once you have something that you do believe in, like from your core, from your heart, if you are not actively pursuing getting those core values to your team every single day and ensuring that they're embodying those core values, then again, they're just titles of a page in a manual, or they are vinyl letters on a wall that actually don't mean anything. So I think that's the key is you need to actively, as a leadership team within your organization, is be taking those core values and ensuring that you're actually doing tasks and activities that directly relate to those core values you're trying to embody. And of course, bringing on a new team member, they're going to know within the first week whether or not these four, five, six core values they've been told to learn and make sure they're part of your role, if they are not actually being given any activities or any ways to think about how to incorporate those values, they're going to realize very quickly that they're just words on a piece of paper.
Yes, yeah, I completely agree. We've experienced one company that we're working with at Beach Getaways in Gulf Shores, Orange Beach, and the Furlongs, Deb and Ken Furlong, have a set of values that they have in their company that they follow and embed very deeply into their culture.
One of the things I love about their values is that not only does every single employee have a printed copy, a little tiny pocket-sized booklet that I'm not sure if they're required to carry around, but certainly everybody seemed to have them readily available when we were there. They also post them very clearly on their website. As part of their About Us, you can go onto the Beach Getaways website and find their core values and how the company is actually incorporating those into their day to day operation. And that is the key at the end of the day. How do you take these core values and incorporate them? That should be at the top of every team meeting, it should be at the top of every monthly report. What activities are we doing or have we achieved that are speaking to our core values?
And I think within Thrive, we have the core values of trust, responsibility, and hospitality within a vibrant environment. That those are our core values. But that trust, hospitality, and responsibility should be the values of just about every company that operates in this industry. They may not announce them, but it's something that I think is important to discuss with a new team member from the very beginning and introduce them to what business values actually are and how they are embedded into the organization. So, just recapping that, making your company values known to your new team members right at the very outset, but also talking to them about trust, hospitality, and responsibility as the guiding principles of every property management company is good to have right at the very start.
Hmm. Absolutely. And I think the great thing is, I think responsibility ties right into our next step, which is industry standards and best practices.
I think we are moving to a point where industry standards that cover things like safety, legal compliance, and high customer service expectations are pretty much universal. And with somebody that's arriving for the first time, has not got any experience in this industry, to be told about those three primary standards and best practices is something that needs to be done in the very first day.
A lot of people, responsibility as a core value is very broad. That incorporates these three: the safety, the legal compliance, the high customer service expectations. You have a responsibility as an organization to adhere to these. And this is the same with any industry, no matter what field you're in. But we see it in the short term rental space or the vacation rental space, is that you begin to start having these pockets of bad actors. You have these pockets of people who are just very focused on, I want to make money as fast as possible by renting a space, and I really don't care how I do it. And I think that it's those bad actors, unfortunately, give the whole industry that much more of a grandstand to the naysayers of what we do in short term rental. And this is where the regulations come in. If we are not doing our utmost to illustrate very visibly on our website, within our communications, within our social media, how, as professional vacation rental property management companies, we're upholding these very basic standards of safety and legal compliance, that's when we start to have our neighborhoods and our communities begin to rally against us. And this has never been more important as these regulations and legislation pop up all over North America, Europe, all over the world, in fact, that we have to be on guard and we have to be doing our best. And that starts with the new employee. If you can indoctrinate them into a mindset of safety, to look at every single interaction with a guest, with a homeowner, and with the team as well, with a mindset of safety, I think we will end up having much better relationships with our community and ensuring that we actually look good because we're being just good, responsible companies.
Oh, it'll make Justin Ford happier too.
Yes, he's one of a handful of lighthouses out there who are trying to steer us away from the rocks.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, this is a brutal sailing analogy just because I'm a sailor, but some people will ignore the lighthouse because they want to take the shortcut. And then they wonder why their boat's up on the rocks. And I really feel very strongly about the message that Justin's trying to get out there. Justin Ford from Breezeway, he was a short-term rental safety expert, is that there are too many people who roll their eyes and say, oh, this is too much, he's going over the top. And it's no, he's not. We are providers to the traveling public. If you own a hotel, you have a completely different standard that you have to maintain, which is far exceeds what we have to in the short-term rental industry. But before too long, we will have to have fire escapes illuminated, and we will have to have mount fire extinguishers, which you should do anyway. You should have your fire extinguishers mounted. But all of these basic safety elements that are required in areas that are selling as a commercial business. If you're a commercial business, you have to do things better and you have to be taking responsibility. Sorry, I feel like I'm getting on a little bit of a rant.
Yeah, you're on your safety bandwagon, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that.
I'm going to take my cape off and put it away.
So, yeah, but this is all about best practices, and this is what has to be taught to those new team members right at the very beginning. These are the industry standards, these are the best practices for safe, legal, and compliant operation of a business in this industry. And once again, I'm going back to my own experience, and I don't think we taught that to anybody who came in new to the business. But how useful would it be? Now we've gone through all these iterations of creating these 7 steps and putting them into an online course. Now I'm looking back and thinking, why did we never do this? Why
Hmm.
didn't we take those steps to ensure that everybody who came and joined us had this such valuable knowledge at the outset, rather than just feeding
Because it
it
would
to
be.
them piecemeal. And that's what everybody does, because you start off somebody, you said, you sit them down, you show them the PMS, give them a telephone, and off they go. And then every so often you'll give them another nugget of information, or they'll
Mhm.
glean it from somewhere else.
Very rarely do entrepreneurs, unless you're seeking capital investment where you start off with a few $1 million in your back pocket, every single company is bootstrapped until you can, make enough revenue to bring on people. Now, when you're making enough revenue to bring on staff members, you are already spinning, you're already in the hamster wheel and it's spinning to the point where there's smoke coming off the axles. So you're wanting somebody to come in and help you to relieve that pressure of all the work you're having to do. So when they arrive on day one, you are struggling to find the time to onboard them correctly. you need to have a written, formal onboarding procedure with all the steps that you want somebody to go through. And that should be written down and decided by your team. And that's part of your leadership team needs to look at every single person. What do they need to know? What's going to be most valuable? And insist that is what they do. And that's what we're trying to do here with Thrive Essentials, is we're trying to take what would normally take multiple days worth of training and compress it down to sitting in front of a computer for a few hours, or even give this course to them for them to complete before they arrive on day one. Because it is hard to give them all of these points of reference before they get into their specific role training, which is why you want them there. You want them to take that pressure off that particular area of the business. And yeah, I think it really comes down to just being diligent with yourself as a principal, that you ensure that you're doing the best for your new team member to give them the best chance for success by giving the foundations that they need.
So let's go on to the next one, which is excelling in hospitality. Anybody coming into this business needs to know about hospitality. If you're going into a hotel, restaurant, you would do a course that covered hospitality, hotel hospitality and restaurant hospitality, but there's nothing there for vacation rental hospitality. You have to do it yourself. And understanding the 7 stages of the guest experience. So, explaining to your new hire what that actually means and how every member of the team is responsible for every stage of that journey, from dreaming about their vacation to booking it to confirming it to the anticipatory stage between booking and stay to the in stay experience, and then finally to the post stay follow up. Explaining all of those stages to that new team member is just a primary piece of information. They need to know what guest expectations are, and because that will give them that foundation to understand why people complain when they do complain, because they come along with a set of expectations they might have from a previous experience, or from an Airbnb they stayed, or from something that somebody else has told them. But if this person doesn't have that knowledge of all those different stages that the guest goes through, and every guest goes through those same 7 stages, if they don't have that full understanding, it's very difficult for them to be able to adapt to what is coming at them through text and messaging and email and telephone calls.
Absolutely. And I think when you're going through with your new hire about the history and the role of property management company, you're going to begin to discuss with them the differentiation between your guest booking with you through an OTA versus direct booking. And the only way you are going to transition bookings to direct is if your guest trusts you. And hospitality, that is one of those key parts of the recipe that will gain your guests' trust. If every single touch point that they have, from the second that they even consider booking with your company right through to after they leave, if every single touch point has made them feel special, welcome, and every single person is happy that they're there, that is going to help build their trust, that maybe if they want to come back, they want to experience that again, so they're going to book with you directly versus through the online travel agencies. I do want to highlight, though, that I don't think that hospitality, we spend a lot of time focusing all of our attention with hospitality on the guest, but I think we mustn't forget those other 3 stakeholders, which is the owner, the community, and the team. We can apply hospitality to those 3 areas of the business with just as much enthusiasm, which, you have a new owner come in who is looking to come and have a sit down and discuss their business operations. And everybody greets them warmly and introduces themselves, or somebody gets them a coffee, or the boardroom is nice and clean and tidy, and maybe they're given a welcome basket. All of these things will play into that owner potentially feeling a lot of trust and happiness towards working with your company. And the same goes for the community. Do you get out there into community events or HOA board meetings or condo board meetings and show up maybe with a box of donuts as a gift from your company? Quite often you're frustrated with these organizations because they keep changing the rules and cause you all kinds of headaches. But if you can be super hospitable, they're going to want you there at the table. So again, and the same thing goes for your team. If you're really hospitable with your team, you celebrate birthdays, you give people the attention that they need, and wanting them to be there, then again, they will be loyal and they will stay with you.
Yeah, I love that you keep coming back to to making sure that every aspect of onboarding takes into account all the different stakeholders, so that you're always mentioning the guests, the owners, the community, and the team. And I think that that's really just primary to onboarding, is to keep talking about that.
Hmm.
Okay, we're nearly coming to the end here. The last one is thriving in virtual, remote, and office teams. And this is an interesting one because how you onboard somebody is going to be different dependent on whether you're onboarding somebody who is going to come into work every day, or it's somebody that's working virtually, maybe somebody in another country, because this is just as important to have that this same onboarding process with a virtual assistant as it is with a full-time employee who comes into the office every day.
And that's why we have the three: virtual, remote, and office teams. Because you have your virtual, you have your office team, but you have somebody who comes into the office, collects their work orders, and then leaves. So they're actually not in the
Mhm.
office most of the day. They're out on the road. So they don't necessarily get that thriving work environment because they're in there for such a short period of time. So you have different organizations in their structure can have lots of different ways of doing these operations. But it's important that you look at these elements of Thrive and how they apply to your team members to ensure that not only are they contributing to the team, but they're also able to receive as well.
Yeah, and also important to highlight to everybody working the communication and collaboration tools that you have available regardless of their location, and making sure that they function efficiently. In my business, all our team were remote. In the first few years, we had a small office in the basement of my home, which is actually how a lot of people start their businesses. But when we grew, we decided not to get an office. We decided to have everybody working remotely, and they were all over the province of Ontario. I think our one of our reservationists was 6 hours from where I lived, but we had a really good communication system. At the beginning, we were using messaging, but then, of course, we went into Slack, but we use Slack very efficiently, and text messaging. Every company's different. It's just making sure that new employees know exactly how the communication and collaboration systems work, and so that they're never sitting there wherever they're located thinking, what do I do now? And who can I ask? And what do I do when I have a problem? It's really important that's explained to them at the very outset how that all hangs together.
And I think that's something that's really important with a great thriving team, wherever they are working. Stay connected by having at least a monthly, if not bi-monthly, full team meeting, which you can do through Zoom, WebEx, where you can reiterate your core values, so everybody feels like they're actually part of a team. If you're constantly just having one-to-one conversations with remote and virtual employees, they struggle to feel like they are included in this family. I'll be careful using that word too, because there's been some comments about that on LinkedIn too. We are part of this team all rowing in the same direction. There you go. There's another chestnut for you.
Cliche, cliche.
Cliche. But what I'm trying to get at is that you need to get everybody together in the same communication platform at the same time, at least a couple of times a year. And even better is if you can step that up to getting the entire team together in person. So, on occasion, dependent on budget, I cannot stress how valuable it is to actually bring in your remote and virtual employees once a year, or at least every other year, so you can get everybody together in person. That solidifies relationships. It means that people will actually develop more of an understanding of people when they meet them in person versus constantly just
Mhm.
seeing them through a video chat. So, if you can add that into your ultimate operations plan of getting people together, that is highly recommended.
It's interesting because I hear more from vendors in this industry who do this. I know that TouchStay had a lot of remote workers, and they tried as hard as they could to get everybody to come together once a year. And then Onerez ran a retreat and they had Matt Landau come in and manage the retreat. So I think a lesson from some of those vendors and think about how you can get all your people together. Okay, I think that about wraps it up. I'm just going to recap. We talked about 7 things that you need to teach to people who are joining your company who don't have the prior knowledge of the industry, or even perhaps somebody who is coming from working in another company. This is always worthwhile to do as a reminder and to bring them back to what the foundation is. And it could be they've come from another company that never gave them this information in the first place. So we talked about the history. Teach them the history of the industry. Tell them what the role of a property management company is and who the stakeholders are. Who are the key players that they're going to come across? Explain the different types of software and how the technology hangs together in your business, even if they're not going to be directly involved with some of it. Just letting them know what that structure is really helpful. Telling them what your core values are, if you have them in place and if you have them embedded in your culture, and also share the wider values of trust, responsibility, and hospitality and community as part of industry values. And then we talked about industry standards and best practices covering safety, legal compliance, and the responsibilities of anybody that works in this industry. Excelling in hospitality and the 7 stages of the guest experience. That's really important to impart, particularly where it's younger people coming in who have only had experience of just doing a quick Airbnb booking. They need to know that there are these different stages in that guest journey and how they can have impact and contribution on each one. And then finally, we talked about thriving in a virtual or remote or in office team and how communication and collaboration is important and sharing the structure of that. So, talked about structured onboarding, focused on skills development, cultural alignment, and clear communication. Do you think we have covered it all?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that one of the things that I took away from the conversations I've had through the summer is the companies that were seeing success with new employee onboarding were the ones who actually had that formal process. And I mentioned that earlier on, is to actually have a documented process of all the things that you want to cover with your new hire and never stray from it. You mentioned earlier about maybe you might have somebody coming from another company. Maybe you should put them through this. Not maybe, you should, because how they did something in another company may not reflect how you do things with your organization. So if you stick to your policy and procedure, you work them through a day or 2 or 3 of whatever it takes to get them familiar with the industry and then with your company and then with their individual role, you will see success and see that team member become a really amazing contributing asset. But not only that, you're going to be setting them up for success. They're going to be happier, and it's less likely they're going to jump ship within a few weeks where they just feel lost and drowning at sea.
And just a final comment from Steve Trover here when he said a well structured onboarding plan increases the chance of long term success and retention by over 80%. And I think that's well worth remembering.
Absolutely. Just before we wrap up, I think it's a good idea to remind you that the Thrive Essentials program is now live. Thrive Essentials covers exactly what we talked about today in depth. We provide this incredible online resource that you can register your new employees for, and they can have this completed within a few hours, and it will give them the foundation that you need for them to really step into their role and be highly successful with a wider understanding of how they can be a really good contributing member to your team. Through the month of October, we have a special offer that if you sign up within the month of October, you're going to get a really good discount. So just make sure to go and visit the vacationrentalformula.com, or you can click the link that is in the description of this episode if you're listening on a smart device or on your computer. and you can get directed across to our information page where you can find out a little bit more.
Mike, thank you so much for joining me on this episode. Always a pleasure to chat to you. We talk to each other every day, 15 times a day. But to actually have this conversation face to face like this is really good. I've enjoyed it. I hope you have too. And you take this information and use it however you wish. And I trust that you will have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you again next week. It's been a pleasure as ever being with you. If there's anything you'd like to comment on, then join the conversation on the show notes for the episode at vacationrentalformula.com. We'd love to hear from you, and I look forward to being with you again next week.